The theme of motherhood came up a lot in this year's countdown. I'm not sure why, but I counted 13 titles that had themes of motherhood and parenting twisted around various horror tropes. Do you have any idea why? I have to think about it, but until I get to the bottom of it, let's look at our number 3 movie. This is M.L. Miller Fright's Best in Horror Countdown 2022 through 2023. Counting down the best in horror within the window of October 1st, 2022 through September 30th, 2023.
Number 3.
Evil Dead Rise was released on April 21st, 2023. It's streaming on HBO MAX from New Line Cinema. It's directed and written by Lee Cronin. When an earthquake rattles an apartment complex, it unleashes a secret basement where one of 3 books of the Necronomicon was buried long ago. When a group of kids find the book and read the passages, an evil force, which has popped up in the woods of Michigan a few times in the past, comes to the city to swallow the souls of everyone occupying a decaying tenement project. This happens to occur on the same night Beth, played by Lily Sullivan, pays a visit to her sister Ellie, played by Alyssa Sutherland, and her 3 children, wannabe activist Bridget, played by Gabrielle Eccles, wannabe DJ Danny, played by Morgan Davies, and artsy youngster Cassie, played by Nell Fisher, putting the entire family in the path of an ancient demonic force. Straight to the point, I had a blast with Evil Dead Rise. That doesn't mean that the film didn't have me worried at times. While the opening feels a bit like a shiny and polished version of what we have come to expect from a typical Evil Dead film, it still manages to deliver on the gore, spooky atmosphere, and some nice callbacks to the originals. The opening scene is bombastic and gets to the point quickly. It feels like the beginning of a really good installment of Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street, where we know what is to come, but in a quick and effective little package. I have to admit, though, because the events in the opener happened in such a truncated manner with characters I couldn't give 2 figs about, I was a bit worried about the rest of the movie to come. Thankfully, the film slows down and actually lets the viewer get to know some of the characters after that slap-in-the-face opener. If there is a criticism for these getting-to-know-you moments, it's that it runs a bit longer before any Evil Deading begins. But with that opener going on the way it did, the film earned a bit of time to take things kind of slow. This is where we meet Beth, Ellie, and Ellie's 3 kids, and basically get to know the inner turmoil and more embedded themes the film will play with using the well-established Evil Dead template. This being the 5th film in this series, we know what to expect. A book will be found, somehow the magic words will be spoken, the evil forces will possess someone, and the rest will be picked off one by one. Blood, gore, and chainsaws to follow. And we get all that, eventually. But first we're introduced to a very peculiar family. Almost too peculiar for my tastes. The group of people introduced at the beginning are not your typical horror movie cast. They're more like the fans in the audience, which I found to be fun, but I also found them to be a bit too alternative to actually be believable and functional. One kid's an activist, one's a DJ, the mom is some sort of inventor who makes some kind of sewing needle finger thingy to work on her clothes or whatever. The only normal one is the little kid who cuts the head off of her dolls and makes them into fighting staffs. The thing is, Beth, played by Lily Sullivan, is meant to be the wild one of the group. But with a family like this, would it really be so looked down upon to go on tour to work with a rock band? I don't think so. But the point is driven home how Beth is looked at as the one who doesn't follow the rules. It just doesn't make sense in this family of weirdos and outcasts. There are all kinds of nuggets given screen time that are obviously being set up to pay off further down the line. This makes for some fun storytelling, but when it is done so as obvious as it is in the opening 20 minutes, it feels somewhat less like smart and creative writing and more like simply following a blueprint. The kids fight with Cassie's staff, breaking it and giving it a sharp, pointy edge. I wonder if that's going to come into play later. Cassie is using her mom's scissors, and instead of being caught with them, she throws the scissors under the bed. I wonder if they're going to show up later. The remote control for the garage is kind of spotty when they try to leave earlier to get pizza. I wonder if that's not going to work later in the movie. The elevator doesn't work so well. And what about that wood chipper in the garage? I'm sure we'll never see that again in the climax. All of these things are pushed right in the face of the viewer so that you know they will come into play further along in the story. I'm not complaining about this per se. I'm just pointing out that the details could have been made a little less obvious. But these are minor quibbles about a pretty awesome movie. Lee Cronin is not the director I would have thought could have delivered such kineticism and dynamicism for Evil Dead Rise. His previous film, Hole in the Ground, was a much more subdued and slower-paced horror film. The attention to emotion and character was there, but both films are like night and day if you watch them together. Evil Dead Rise is thankfully creatively filmed in terms of adopting some of Raimi's more extreme angles and creative moments. Much of the film's scenes take bits and pieces from the Evil Dead series and turn them on their ear without making them unrecognizable. Once she is possessed, Ellie is locked out of the apartment away from the rest of the family. Only a plank of wood, the door, and a chain, the door chain, separate her from the rest of the family, which is very close to the cellar door scene in the original. The swooping camera movements of the evil forces tracking towards the house is copied well, and there are all kinds of nods that work, such as Ellie's initial battle with the forces in the elevator, mimicking the molestation by trees and vines in the original. All in all, Cronin is able to ape Raimi's style, while still giving it some of the real-world drama, terror, and emotional heft that Fede Alvarez was able to put into the remake. Alvarez chose wisely in giving Cronin the director's chair. The apartment is wonderfully decorated, but it's cluttered as all get out. It's got crazy swirls and rings all over the place, suggesting that even before the possessions occurred, there's a lot of chaos going on in this small space. While much of the horror has been highlighted in various trailers leading up to Evil Dead Rise's release, I was pleasantly surprised that most of the clips were shown by about the halfway point of the film, leaving a lot of the movie left to surprise me. I was thankful for this, as I feel most horror films are spoiled by the trailers. That said, with the substantial lead-in establishing the only way in and out of the predicament, it's pretty obvious the pathway this film is going to go. Basically, they have to get out of the apartment, get to the hallway, get to the elevator, and then get to the garage, then hopefully get to safety. This simple, clear, and video game-like pathway makes it pretty easy to follow and allows the film to really fire at full cylinders with the gore and character. And this film has a whole lot of gore. This film sports some of the goppiest, goriest grue I've seen in a mainstream movie since, well, the last Evil Dead. It definitely keeps the tradition going, as Evil Dead has always been an effects showcase from the beginning. Seeing how every possession is different and unique, as well as the carnage they unleash, is always fun. Some have white eyes, some have yellow irises, others are just bloody messes. It's a whole lot of gory going on, and I loved every minute of it. The design of Ellie, who is by far the most horrifying of the possessions, is top tier. It helps that actress Alyssa Sutherland has a distinct and unique face with eyes that point upward at the ends, sort of like a cat's. Add in some hillbilly teeth and some yellow lenses, and you have the stuff of nightmares. But the real treat was seeing the conglomeration of the possessed during the climax. The final monster is gory, somewhat original, though it's been done before in movies like Slither and Society, and well represented with both practical and digital effects. But while Evil Dead Rise delivers on big body effects, it still manages to cause a shudder with more subtle effects, like the Drag Me to Hell homage with The Fly. If you're an effects whore like me, Evil Dead Rise is going to leave you pleased and satisfied. One of the things that's bound to cause debate is the way Cronin expands the Evil Dead universe by introducing not only a second but a third Book of the Dead. While Raimi, Campbell, and co. have explored the original concept quite a lot, and while it might anger some fanboys, I feel that Bruce Campbell's slapstick era might be behind us, and I'm pretty okay with that. The first 3 Evil Deads were great, and I loved the Ash vs. Evil Dead series, but by the end of it all, the whole thing started becoming a parody of itself. Bringing back a 64-year-old Ash for future films feels like it might be a step backwards from the intensity of what has been delivered in the Evil Dead remake and Rise. Still, I'd love to be proven wrong about that. As is, I feel if you're a fan of gruesome gore, intense horror, topsy-turvy pacing, and creative new spins on old Evil Dead tropes, Evil Dead Rise delivers on all accounts. I feel Alvarez's remake is still my favorite of the two of this new generation of Evil Dead films, but writer-director Lee Cronin takes the torch and does horrifying, shocking, and downright awesome things with it. This harrowing tale of bad motherhood hails from Mexico and Peru and is a doozy of a tale that you shouldn't show anyone expecting a baby. Just missing the countdown by a skosh is HUESERA, the Bone Woman. HUESERA, the Bone Woman was released on February 16th, 2023. It's streaming on Shudder from XYZ Films. It's directed by Garza Cervera and written by Garza Cervera, Abia Castillo, and Patricio Saiz. HUESERA begins with good news. Valeria, played by Natalia Solian, and her husband Raul, played by Alfonso Dosal, find out that after seemingly trying for a while, they finally find out that they're going to have a baby. But soon after the pregnancy is confirmed, it's made clear that while Raul is over the moon about the news, Valeria has some reservations. She's got a lot of reservations. And not only does she not think she wants the baby, but she doesn't know if she really wants to be married either. Both her family and her former girlfriend Octavia, played by Mayra Batalla, are trying to be supportive, but they also have concerns about Valeria's mental health and well-being. Having seen her around children in the past and knowing her much more than Raul thinks he does. Valeria's aunt sees much more than that. It seems an ancient curse named HUESERA may be taking hold of Valeria's soul, which means horrible things for the baby. HUESERA, the Bone Woman, is a subtle horror film from Mexico that leans heavily on drama and psychology. It's about a woman attempting to find herself when everyone around her has differing understandings of who she is and what she wants. Those around her project their own wishes on Valeria, and Valeria, being confused and mentally and physically strained, allows this, making her ultimately unhappy and vulnerable to the dark forces of the evil spirit HUESERA. This seems like a case of prepartum or prenatal depression, where Valeria is miserable through her pregnancy, taking all kinds of risks and intentionally doing things to sabotage her relationship with Raul and the health of her baby. Valeria is often in some form of denial, forgetting she's pregnant and fantasizing about what it was like before she was tied to Raul in this relationship. I think in many ways, this film addresses issues that many women suffer during pregnancy, but are too afraid to say out loud, given that being pregnant is so often looked at as such a blessing to so many people. That said, while there are a lot of nightmares, hallucinations, and creepy things happening in the latter half of HUESERA, the bulk of the film leans heavily on drama. This is a serious film, rarely taking a moment for levity or even mild happiness. It's a film that's going to hit those with children the hardest because of the complex emotions at play. That said, many will nope out of this film by the halfway point because so much of it is just Valeria moping around and crying. The latter half has thrilling scenes with haunting imagery, such as mysterious shadow figures in the distance watching Valeria, some strange nightmares where Valeria's bones are being broken, and an especially gnarly mass of arms and legs that appears during the climax. But those moments are few and far between. For the most part, it's Valeria attempting to cope with the pregnancy and making very bad decisions along the way. This is an emotional roller coaster for Valeria, and actress Natalia Solian does a fantastic job of making her role sympathetic despite the self-destructive things she is doing. It helps that the dark feelings are given an entity to embody, namely the titular evil spirit, but still it's a testament to her performance that I never felt angry towards Valeria despite the horrifying things she is doing to herself and others. While the resolution of Valeria's problem may not be the most Hollywood of endings, it's the most logical given this situation. But I could understand how a lot of people might have some disdain towards the character and the film by the time the credits roll. HUESERA is not an easy movie to get through. It's often slow and methodically paced to embody the depression Valeria burdens all the way through. Those who don't mind experiencing the lives of others, no matter how soul-shattering that experience may be, would be the target audience for HUESERA. But steel yourself. This is some heavy, dramatic material that may evoke emotions you didn't know you had and may not feel comfortable embodying. HUESERA, the Bone Woman, is a highly effective dramatic horror reminiscent of the arduous, terrifying gut punch that I felt while watching Possession or Rosemary's Baby. Yeah, it can be that heavy. As always, feel free to agree, disagree, Or how about you play along at home and give me your own picks for your favorite horror movies? It's October, so let's talk horror. Come back tomorrow for the next level in the Best in Horror Countdown. Be sure to hit all of those pertinent bells and whistles down below, and you'll never miss a post. Happy Halloween, folks.